Before this day slips past you like any ordinary date, there is something you need to hear. What is unfolding today is far greater than another routine horoscope update or another astrological headline that disappears the moment you scroll away. Today, on July 4th, the heavens reach a critical turning point. A powerful celestial ignition is taking place, and whether you recognize it yet or not, its vibration has already begun moving through your thoughts, your emotions, and your life. At 3 degrees and 52 minutes of Gemini, Mars forms an exact conjunction with Uranus, creating one of the most volatile and awakening alignments of the year. When the planet that represents determination, movement, courage, and decisive action merges with the planet that governs disruption, liberation, and unexpected breakthroughs while standing inside the zodiac sign, connected with the human mind, communication, perception, and the nervous system. Change does not arrive gradually. It arrives all at once. There are moments in astrology that gently encourage growth over time, and then there are moments like this one that split the timeline in two. This belongs to the second kind. Entire chapters that once appeared fixed can suddenly reach their ending before you even realize the story has changed. Yet the conjunction itself is only the opening movement of something much larger, and that is where the true significance begins. Over the course of the next 48 hours, Mars will continue forward, forming exact connections with all 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Together, these movements create an exceptionally uncommon geometric sequence across the sky, a configuration that astrologers have anticipated for years because of its extraordinary evolutionary potential. If your birth chart places you among 3 particular zodiac signs, the experience may feel far beyond an ordinary shift in circumstances. Instead, it can resemble an abrupt awakening so overwhelming that it feels as though the universe itself has reached into your life, taken hold of your shoulders, and forced your eyes open to a truth you could no longer avoid. Perhaps this explains something you've already been sensing. During the past week, you may have noticed a strange current flowing beneath your skin, an unusual restlessness that refused to settle, no matter how much you tried to distract yourself. Your thoughts may have raced without warning, your intuition may have become unusually loud, and your inner world may have felt charged with an invisible electricity that seemed impossible to explain. If that experience sounds familiar, it is not without reason. There is a very specific cause behind that sensation, and understanding it will completely change the way you interpret what has been happening inside you. That explanation comes later, but first you must understand the mechanics of what the sky is actually creating today. Ignoring this influence may sound tempting, yet this particular current does not politely wait for anyone's attention. It moves whether you acknowledge it or not, because the heavens themselves are reaching a point where the pressure can no longer remain contained. Many people reduce a conjunction to the simple idea of 2 planets standing beside one another. That description barely scratches the surface. Calling today's conjunction merely 2 neighboring planets is like describing lightning as nothing more than a tiny flash of light. The reality carries far greater intensity. Astrologers have watched this date approach because they understood that Mars and Uranus together generate an explosive mixture of raw momentum and radical liberation. Mars represents the instinct that pushes you to act, to confront fear, to break through hesitation, and to pursue what demands courage. Uranus represents the force that interrupts routine, overturns expectations, awakens sleeping awareness, and destroys limitations that have overstayed their purpose. Uranus never asks whether you feel prepared before it introduces change. It removes the door entirely rather than waiting for permission to enter. When these 2 planets unite in an exact conjunction, as they do today during the early hours of the night at 2 o'clock, the resulting energy becomes intensely electric, functioning almost like a cosmic ignition switch, waiting for the precise moment to activate. Because this conjunction occurs in Gemini, the sign associated with thinking patterns, learning, communication, information exchange, curiosity, and the nervous system, its primary battlefield is not somewhere beyond your reach among distant stars. It unfolds inside your own consciousness. Your mind may suddenly accelerate. Ideas that previously seemed disconnected begin fitting together with astonishing precision. Realizations that have quietly assembled themselves over recent weeks or even months can arrive all at once, transforming uncertainty into unmistakable clarity. Answers emerge with such force that you may wonder how you ever failed to recognize what now appears completely obvious. Yet there is another side to this awakening that deserves equal attention. Uranus has no interest in preserving familiar routines simply because they feel safe. Comfort has never been its highest priority. Freedom is. If any part of your life has become a prison, whether that prison exists as an outdated belief, a relationship that no longer reflects who you have become, or an identity you continue carrying long after your soul has outgrown it, today's conjunction possesses the power to dismantle those walls without waiting for your approval. The structures that once seemed permanent can fracture in an instant, not because the universe wishes to punish you, but because evolution cannot continue while unnecessary confinement remains in place. Even so, remarkable as this conjunction already appears, it still represents only the first movement of a much larger sequence. What follows over the next 48 hours deserves even greater attention, because it extends this initial shock into something capable of reshaping the entire decade ahead. The conjunction between Mars and Uranus does not exist in isolation. Instead, it acts as the first falling domino within an extraordinary chain reaction that unfolds across one single weekend. Today, Mars reaches Uranus, releasing the first surge of awakening through sudden impact and unmistakable disruption. Then, only 18 hours later, during the evening of July 4th, Mars forms an exact sextile with Neptune in Aries. At that moment, the atmosphere changes dramatically. The same electric force that first erupted through shock begins finding direction. What initially appeared unpredictable starts revealing intention. Neptune receives that restless energy and reshapes it into vision, imagination, spiritual purpose, and meaningful inspiration. What first resembled chaos gradually reveals itself as part of a larger design, allowing confusion to transform into a powerful sense of destiny. The process does not stop there. By the morning of July 5th, Mars completes an exact trine with Pluto in Aquarius, bringing the final piece of the pattern into place. This is the moment when the transformation becomes anchored. Pluto does far more than strengthen what has already begun. It establishes permanence. Whatever truth emerges, whatever barrier falls away, whatever realization enters your awareness during this brief window, does not simply pass like a temporary emotional experience. Instead, it restructures your reality from its deepest foundation. Across only 48 hours, Mars connects successively with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto through three exact aspects, serving as the messenger that carries the evolutionary intention of an entire generation directly into your individual life. Alignments of this magnitude occur only on the rarest occasions, making this weekend far more than another series of planetary movements. It becomes a defining passage through which profound personal transformation is delivered with unmistakable force, preparing everything that follows for an entirely different future. There is one detail about this extraordinary sequence that makes it even more astonishing, and very few people are talking about it. The alignment unfolding across these 48 hours is not simply uncommon. The last time all three outer planets were connected through this exact geometric relationship, while simultaneously being activated by a rapidly moving inner planet, the overwhelming majority of people living today had not yet been born. That alone should tell you that what is unfolding cannot be dismissed as another routine astrological moment. Events like this leave fingerprints on history because they coincide with periods when collective reality changes direction. Yet as remarkable as that sounds, the timing surrounding today's alignment adds another layer that is impossible to overlook. Pause for a moment and consider the date itself. Today is July 4th in the year 2026. This is not merely another Independence Day. It marks the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. At the exact same time, Uranus, the celestial force associated with revolution, liberation, disruption, and radical change, is moving through Gemini, the very same zodiac sign it occupied when the Declaration of Independence was signed in the year 1706. That correspondence reaches far beyond coincidence. Astrology pays close attention to repeating cycles because recurring planetary positions often accompany recurring historical themes. What we're witnessing is one of those repeating signatures. Each time Uranus has returned to Gemini during the history of the United States, the nation has entered a defining period that permanently reshaped its identity. During the first cycle came the Revolutionary War, giving birth to the Republic itself. During the second cycle arrived the Civil War, the deadliest conflict ever fought on American soil, a conflict that tore the country apart before rebuilding it through unimaginable sacrifice. During the third cycle, the nation was transformed again through World War II, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the introduction of the atomic bomb, events that fundamentally altered America's position across the world. Now a fourth cycle has begun. Uranus has once again entered Gemini, and on the nation's 250th birthday, Mars forms an exact conjunction with it, striking this revolutionary planet with explosive force like a spark reaching waiting fuel. When history repeats its larger rhythms with this level of precision, the pattern deserves attention. The message appears unmistakable. Whatever tensions have been quietly accumulating beneath the surface across politics, technology, ideas, communication, and the broader direction of society are approaching a moment when they can no longer remain hidden. Pressure seeks release, and hidden developments seek expression. Still, limiting this alignment to national events would overlook its deeper purpose. Astrology functions across many layers simultaneously. The same cosmic movements capable of influencing countries also speak directly to individual lives. While history may be turning another page on the collective stage, something equally transformative is taking place within your personal experience. That brings us to the 3 zodiac signs standing closest to this powerful current. Every person will feel the vibration created by today's conjunction in one form or another, but 3 particular signs are positioned where the impact becomes especially immediate. For them, this is not simply another passing influence. It resembles the sudden flash of lightning that illuminates an entire landscape at once, revealing details that had always been present, but remained impossible to see until that single, unforgettable instant. If you are an Aries, listen especially carefully because this message speaks directly to the path unfolding before you. The conjunction taking place today activates your 3rd house, the area of your chart connected with communication, conversations, everyday interactions, learning, close relationships, siblings, neighbors, and the people who occupy your immediate environment. There is another reason this matters even more for you. Mars, the planet initiating this entire sequence, is your ruling planet. It governs your instinct, your courage, your movement, and the way your life force expresses itself. Because of that, this alignment is not operating at the edge of your birth chart. It reaches into your core. Its effects resonate through your identity in an intensely personal way, making the coming days feel impossible to ignore. Prepare yourself, because something that has remained concealed is approaching the moment when it becomes visible. This revelation does not unfold gradually through scattered clues. It arrives with unmistakable certainty. You may suddenly learn something about someone close to you, that completely changes the way you interpret a relationship you believed you understood. Perhaps information surfaces about conversations that occurred without your knowledge. Perhaps someone else's hidden intentions finally reveal themselves after remaining carefully disguised. Perhaps you realize that a person you trusted had never shown you the complete truth. The specific form will differ from one Aries to another, yet Uranus consistently operates according to the same principle. Its revelations are abrupt, unexpected, and impossible to dismiss once they arrive. However, the greatest transformation does not come from discovering the truth itself. The real breakthrough begins with the choice you make after that discovery. That is where this transit becomes extraordinary. At the very same time, Mars receives an exact sextile from Neptune in Aries, and Neptune occupies your first house, the house associated with your identity, your sense of self, and the person you are becoming. This creates an additional layer of guidance that softens confusion without weakening clarity. Alongside the surprise comes an almost uncanny ability to recognize what your intuition has been trying to tell you all along. You will not simply analyze the truth intellectually. You will recognize it instinctively, with a certainty that settles deep within you before your mind has finished processing the evidence. Suddenly, the words you have struggled to find become obvious. The boundaries you hesitated to establish become completely clear. The people who genuinely deserve your loyalty separate themselves naturally from those who have quietly exhausted your energy without giving the same honesty in return. Conversations taking place during this weekend carry far greater significance than they first appear to hold. Some relationships may reach an ending because they can no longer survive in the presence of complete honesty. Others may unexpectedly begin because authenticity creates space for healthier connections to enter your life. Allow this process to unfold instead of resisting it. This is not a moment to bury your voice beneath politeness or self-doubt. This is the moment when unnecessary noise falls away and your own truth becomes impossible to silence. Once you finally express what you genuinely know, there is no returning to the version of yourself that pretended not to notice what had already become unmistakably clear. Temporary discomfort created by truth will always lead you toward greater freedom than the temporary comfort created by believing a lie. There are moments when the universe does not gently invite you to evolve. Instead, it places you directly at the center of its most powerful current. And if you're a Gemini, this is one of those moments. Pay close attention because no other zodiac sign is positioned to experience today's alignment with the same level of intensity. This is not an exaggeration, nor is it symbolic language meant to sound dramatic. The exact conjunction between Mars and Uranus is taking place at 3 degrees and 52 minutes of Gemini, activating your first house, the area of your chart that governs your identity, your physical presence, your outward expression, and the deepest understanding of who you believe yourself to be. This is why today's energy feels so personal. It is not passing beside you, it is moving directly through you. In many ways, you'll become the point where this extraordinary current enters the human experience. Imagine standing beneath a sky filled with gathering electricity, while everyone else notices only distant clouds. You are the one holding the lightning rod. The charge that is beginning to move across the collective first announces itself inside your own mind, your own body, and your own spirit. That is why the sensations you have been carrying over the past several days may have felt impossible to explain. Earlier, we spoke about the strange restlessness, the racing thoughts that refuse to slow down, the quiet feeling that something enormous is approaching, even though you could not identify its source. Perhaps sleep has become lighter. Perhaps your attention has shifted from one idea to another without warning. Perhaps it has felt as though your inner world has expanded beyond the limits of your own skin, creating the unsettling impression that you can no longer fit inside the version of yourself you have been living. None of those experiences appeared by accident. They had been preparing you for this exact moment. Your nervous system has already been responding to the approaching wave before the conjunction reached perfection. There is a deeper reason behind that sensitivity. Mercury, your ruling planet, is currently retrograde in Cancer, activating your second house, the area associated with values, self-worth, personal security, and the way you measure your own importance. Because Mercury governs Gemini, it also becomes intimately connected to this conjunction, weaving your present transformation together with emotional material that has remained buried beneath the surface for much longer than you may realize. This is not simply about changing your image. It is about confronting the places where your confidence has quietly depended upon the approval of other people. It is about recognizing the moments when you accepted someone else's definition of your value instead of trusting your own. It is about acknowledging every time you softened your voice, reduced your brilliance, or hid your authentic nature because you believed your true self might make someone else uncomfortable. These old emotional agreements have shaped your identity for years, perhaps without your conscious awareness. Today, that pattern reaches its breaking point. Mars and Uranus do not patiently negotiate with outdated versions of your life. They arrive with unmistakable force, removing what has already completed its purpose. Every mask created for acceptance, every compromise made to avoid conflict, every carefully edited version of yourself designed to satisfy the expectations of others becomes increasingly impossible to maintain beneath this extraordinary pressure. The transformation may reveal itself in different ways, depending upon your own journey. Some Geminis may suddenly feel compelled to completely change their appearance, because the person looking back from the mirror no longer reflects the truth growing within. Others may recognize that a career path once chosen for safety no longer supports the future, calling them forward. Some may speak words they have carried silently for years, expressing truths with such complete honesty that even they are surprised by the courage rising through their own voice. Regardless of the external form, the internal result remains the same. By the time this weekend has passed, your energy no longer resonates at the frequency you carried into it. Yet even that description does not fully capture what is taking place. This is not the birth of a completely different person. Rather, it is the removal of everything that has concealed the person who has always existed beneath countless layers of adaptation. The authentic version of you has been waiting patiently beneath expectations, obligations, compromises, and carefully managed appearances. Now that version begins stepping forward without apology. Once your true identity has emerged into the light, there is no practical way to force it back into hiding. The world is preparing to encounter the genuine Gemini that has always existed beneath every adjustment you made to belong. Others may be surprised by the confidence, honesty, and unmistakable presence they suddenly witness. But deep inside, you have been preparing for this encounter far longer than anyone else realizes. Now let us turn towards Scorpio, because another extraordinary transformation is unfolding there as well, though it moves through entirely different territory. Scorpio understands better than almost anyone that the deepest truths rarely reveal themselves on the surface. Yours is the sign that naturally explores hidden motivations, emotional complexity, psychological depth, and the unseen currents shaping every meaningful relationship. For that very reason, today's conjunction reaches directly into the place where your greatest personal evolution can occur. Mars and Uranus unite inside your 8th house, the domain governing intimacy, shared resources, psychological transformation, power dynamics, emotional vulnerability, and everything that quietly exists beneath ordinary conversation. This territory already belongs to your natural instincts, yet today's alignment insists that you reclaim it at an entirely new level. There is another reason this moment carries exceptional importance for Scorpio. Mars serves as your traditional planetary ruler, while Pluto, now traveling through Aquarius, represents your modern ruler. By the morning of July 5th, Mars forms an exact trine with Pluto, completing the activation of the minor grand trine. This means the entire network of planetary energies connected to your sign becomes illuminated simultaneously. Rarely does your astrological foundation receive this level of unified activation. The result is not merely another opportunity for growth. It becomes the defining breakthrough that reaches directly into the most protected and carefully guarded part of your life. Somewhere within your world exists an attachment that no longer reflects who you are becoming. For some Scorpios, this attachment lives inside a romantic relationship whose emotional agreements have quietly become unhealthy. For others, it exists within financial arrangements that slowly reduce independence while appearing necessary on the surface. Still others may recognize psychological patterns built upon obligation, guilt, control, fear, or the belief that survival depends upon remaining connected to circumstances that quietly drain personal strength. Whatever form this bond has taken, today's Uranian current possesses the power to break what has remained locked for far too long. Understandably, such a possibility can feel deeply unsettling for Scorpio because few signs value emotional control and strategic stability as intensely as you do. Yet the purpose of this disruption is not meaningless destruction. It is intentional liberation. The exact trine between Mars and Pluto guarantees that whatever leaves your life during this period creates space for something stronger, more genuine, and far more closely aligned with the person you are in the process of becoming. What falls away does so because it can no longer accompany you into the next chapter of your evolution. And what replaces it carries the authenticity your soul has quietly been seeking all along. When a relationship is rooted in authentic freedom, emotional honesty, and the willingness for both people to continue growing together, this extraordinary sequence of planetary energy is not designed to tear it apart. Quite the opposite. It has the power to reveal dimensions of closeness that neither of you may have believed were possible. There can be a sudden moment when emotional barriers dissolve without warning, when conversations become effortlessly honest, and when you recognize one another with a level of transparency that had remained hidden until now. The distance created by fear begins disappearing, replaced by a connection that feels more genuine, because nothing important is left unspoken. Yet the same energy follows a completely different path, when a relationship has been sustained through manipulation, silent obligation, emotional dependency, or the illusion that remaining together is safer than facing the truth. Uranus has never been interested in preserving structures that survive only because people fear change. Its purpose is liberation. Mars provides the decisive action that follows that realization. Together they create the momentum required to end what has already lost its authenticity. If a connection has become a prison disguised as security, this alignment can break those chains with unmistakable force, placing the final decision directly into your hands. For Scorpio, this is the deeper lesson hidden beneath every external event. Real freedom cannot exist while your energy remains invested in maintaining control that no longer serves your highest good. The truth must eventually be acknowledged, even if accepting it transforms the foundation of your closest emotional bonds. Somewhere beneath the hesitation, beneath the fear of disruption, and beneath every attempt to postpone the inevitable, there has always been a quiet voice telling you exactly what needed to change. That inner knowing has not appeared today. It has accompanied you for months. What changes now is that the universe no longer allows you to silence it. The pressure has reached the point where avoidance is no longer sustainable. Once the revelation arrives, your path forward becomes impossible to deny. Still, the conjunction itself is not the ending of the story. It is only the beginning of a much longer process. Many people imagine that once the exact aspect passes, its influence disappears with it. That is not how this sequence operates. The initial conjunction ignites the transformation today, but its effects continue expanding throughout the remainder of the month, gradually reshaping reality as each subsequent planetary movement builds upon what has already begun. On July 6th, only 2 days after the conjunction, the Sun forms an exact square with Saturn. Think of this as the moment after the lightning has illuminated the landscape. During the conjunction, you receive the breakthrough. During the square, you discover whether you possess the strength to embody it. Saturn represents discipline, responsibility, structure, and long-term commitment. It asks whether the insight you experienced has become genuine wisdom or whether it was simply an emotional reaction. The universe is not placing obstacles in your way as punishment. It is testing the stability of your transformation, because lasting change must remain standing even after the excitement fades. A revelation that cannot survive pressure has not yet become real transformation. Then another significant turning point arrives on July 7th, when Neptune stations retrograde in Aries. This marks the beginning of an entirely different phase of the journey. Neptune, moving backward, strips away illusions with remarkable precision. Anything connected to your recent awakening that was based upon fantasy, denial, wishful thinking, or self-deception gradually loses its disguise. False stories dissolve under careful examination. Yet, if your breakthrough emerged from authentic truth, Neptune retrograde becomes an ally rather than a challenge. Instead of weakening your experience, it deepens your understanding of why every event unfolded exactly as it did, allowing spiritual clarity to replace uncertainty with quiet confidence. There is one final piece connecting this entire sequence into a complete picture. Mercury, the ruling planet governing this conjunction through its retrograde position in Cancer, does not station direct until July 23rd. That timing carries profound importance because it means today's events are not fully understood in a single afternoon or even over the course of this remarkable weekend. The emotional processing, the mental integration, the personal reinvention, and the deeper recognition of what truly changed continue unfolding across nearly 3 full weeks. The complete meaning of what begins today will not reveal itself immediately. Instead, understanding arrives gradually, almost like scattered pieces of a forgotten dream, slowly finding their proper place, until the entire image finally becomes unmistakably clear. When that moment arrives toward the end of July, you may look back at this weekend with entirely different eyes. What first appeared chaotic will reveal astonishing precision. What once felt random will prove deeply intentional. You will recognize that the universe was not carelessly removing pieces of your life. It was carefully clearing away exactly what had already completed its purpose, so that what genuinely belongs in your future could finally reach you without obstruction. None of this energy pauses while people decide whether they feel comfortable receiving it. It continues moving forward, inviting only one question that truly matters. What will you choose to do once it arrives? That question separates those who experience lasting transformation from those who remain trapped inside familiar patterns. External events alone never determine the outcome. Choice does. Today's alignment carries tremendous intensity. It is unpredictable, emotionally charged, mentally stimulating, and impossible to experience without feeling some degree of discomfort. Your first instinct may be to dismiss the strange restlessness you have been carrying. You may convince yourself that the racing thoughts, the unexpected desire to change your life, the emotional urgency, or the feeling that something inside you refuses to stay the same is merely stress, exhaustion, or another ordinary passing mood. Yet somewhere inside, you already recognize that this explanation is incomplete. You know this experience reaches deeper than temporary emotion. Alignments like the Mars and Uranus conjunction occurring within this precise configuration are extraordinarily uncommon. Seeing Mars activate all 3 outer planets over one weekend belongs to the kind of astrological sequence that defines an entire generation. Witnessing this occur on the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, while Uranus occupies the same zodiac sign it held when the nation was founded, gives the moment unmistakable historical significance. Perhaps there is another coincidence worth reconsidering as well. Out of countless videos and countless distractions, something guided your attention here today. Something within the title, the message, or the timing caused you to pause instead of continuing to scroll. Whether you describe that as intuition, synchronicity, or simple curiosity, the experience itself deserves your awareness. Every person responding to this energy now faces the same decision. Some will resist what they already know is changing. They will continue protecting situations that have long outlived their purpose because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Fear will persuade them that genuine transformation asks too much, arrives too quickly, or carries too much risk. Weeks later, they may wonder why life appears unchanged, despite standing at the doorway of extraordinary possibility. Others will make a different choice. They will allow honesty to become stronger than fear. They will speak the words they have postponed, even while uncertainty still trembles in their voice. They will release relationships, beliefs, habits, or circumstances that quietly drain their life force even when letting go feels uncomfortable. Most importantly, they will allow outdated versions of themselves to dissolve because they trust that authenticity is worth more than temporary comfort. Those individuals will eventually remember this weekend as the moment their entire direction changed. The universe is not demanding perfect certainty before you move forward. It asks only for the courage to take the next step before every answer has appeared. That is the deeper spirit of Mars united with Uranus. It is the willingness to leap before every detail becomes visible, followed by the astonishing realization that the path supporting you had existed all along, hidden only by the limits of your previous perspective. Today is far more than another date on the calendar. It represents a threshold between one chapter and the next. Once you move beyond it, returning to the person you once were is no longer possible because awareness itself changes everything. The only remaining question is whether you are prepared to walk through that doorway. If you have stayed with me until this final moment, thank you for sharing your time and attention. If this message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring these powerful astrological movements together, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this growing community. I would also love to hear what you have been experiencing, so feel free to leave your thoughts and personal insights in the comments below. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next journey we explore together.